Ngay. Nói nghe xịn.
Recording in progress.
Listed here. And now I'm going to jump right to the portfolio prep section. All right, so portfolio preparation. Most art colleges require a portfolio of artwork as part of their admissions requirements. We are no different. And I would say it's one of the most important parts of an art school application. It doesn't sort of account for the entire application process or admissions decision, but it is a really large portion. I mean, we're not only looking at GPA, grades, a letter of recommendation, a sort of personal essay or writing sample, but then we're looking at your artwork as a student and how you're going to fit into, you know, whatever program or college that you're going to be attending. So our requirements at MCAD are 12 to 20 pieces total. We do require one observational drawing. This is something that you're probably going to see at about half of the art schools in the country. Most, I would say it's about 50-50 require some form of observational drawing. And then we also recommend to include examples of landscape, still life, interior space, and self-portrait. And then the rest is up to you. So, you know, a question we get asked a lot is, you know, sort of what makes a good portfolio? You know, how do you put together a portfolio? And, you know, in truth, there's no exact right answer. I would say it really depends on the person, the artist, the student. I think getting advice from, you know, multiple sources is a really good idea. Asking, you know, your friends, asking your art teacher are great places to start. But more importantly, ask the colleges that you're applying to. That's a large part of what we do in admissions is, you know, work directly with students, either through one-on-one portfolio reviews, at portfolio days, and essentially have a conversation with them about, you know, what they're bringing to the table and what they're going to put in portfolio. And so it's great to talk to schools and admissions counselors like us. And I'll talk more about opportunities to do that a little bit later. So now I want to show some examples of kind of the different recommendations or categories of art. So this is an observational drawing. So essentially, you know, one of our requirements, something done from observation, usually is a black and white drawing, usually in charcoal or graphite, but doesn't have to be. It could include color. It could be an observational painting, as long as it's from that process of doing it by sight. You know, you're not looking at a photographic reference. You're, you know, looking at something with your eyes and drawing it. I usually recommend including, you know, not only sort of a foreground, middle ground, and background, but also including a large value range to kind of show that depth, to show, you know, something looking realistic and showing its place in context, showing lighting. This could be most commonly be a still life, but it also could be a portrait, could be a landscape. It's really up to you. Now, here are some examples of landscapes. Obviously, I'm sure you know what a landscape is, but I do like this slide to show just how different the examples can be, and also just the different ranges of art and design that, you know, we offer at MCAD. We have, like I said, 13 different areas of study. So, you know, we offer photography. You're going to see an example of that here. We have printmaking. There's a relief print in the bottom left corner. We have a lot of illustration-based majors. You know, a couple of these are more illustration-like. There's one of them that's more like an observational drawing. Same with still life. So some are more illustrative, some are more flat and graphic, some are more maybe conceptual, some are essentially observational drawings. Same with interior space. And also, they don't have to be two-dimensional. We also have, examples of three-dimensional pieces. And self-portrait. Like I said, these aren't required pieces necessarily, but I like to show these as a kind of jumping off point for pieces that you might make, or, a suggestion to include a kind of a range of work in your portfolio that shows, not only just one example of a style or an art form, but to show, a larger range, a more broad approach, showing both kind of style and consideration, a sense of consistency, a sense of your artistic voice, but also maybe showing experimentation, going outside of that. And we're just looking for, how well you understand different elements and principles of art and design, how you're implementing those practices into your pieces, like composition. I think these are all really cool examples of compositions, both in more figurative work, abstract, design, photography, painting, illustration, color and value. How are you using color in your work? Is there a large value range? Is it more flat and graphic? And then materials and craft. And this is a big one. What materials are you using? Are you using more traditional materials, paint on canvas, pencil on paper, digital photography, or are you experimenting with those materials and how you're presenting them to a viewer? And I like a lot of these examples, people using maybe metallic-based paint, cutting up Polaroid film, creating an abstraction out of it, or making more site-specific sculptures, like that one in the upper right of kind of these little figurines on somebody's ear, which I think is a really cool example. There's some lenticular imagery, painting on cardboard, using 3 dimensions, and using 3 dimensions in a more traditionally two-dimensional piece. Also, we get a lot of questions about process work, like, maybe you have a sketchbook, or maybe you're really good at documenting your process, whether that be more two-dimensionally or in video form. I think one of the most exciting things about social media, Instagram or TikTok, is like, artists showing their process. This is not a requirement of the MCAD portfolio, nor of most portfolios, I would say. But I would say that it can be a great supplementary piece. Can show kind of more information or context on your work. Same with sketchbook pages. Maybe you have a really interesting sketchbook, or maybe some interesting excerpts from that sketchbook that you want to show. And so I also want to sort of reiterate, we're a school that offers, many different disciplines of art and design. And in part, essentially, when you're applying, you are going to put on your application that you are applying to a specific major. But no matter what, you're going to come in as an undeclared fine arts student and declare your major later when you're at MCAD. So you can essentially, our portfolio accepts all forms of visual art. So you can include animation, comic art, drawing and painting, filmmaking, furniture, graphic design, illustration, photography, print paper book, product design, sculpture. It doesn't really matter, exactly what you're putting in your portfolio. We just want to see how you're thinking about art. We want to see what you're making. And we want to see, potentially your process. And depending on what you're going to major in when you get to MCAD, we're kind of looking at that. Maybe you want to go into animation. Maybe you're doing some illustration or some comic artwork, or maybe you want to do fine arts and you're doing, drawing and painting or sculpture. You don't necessarily have to show a lot of sort of interdisciplinary work. But if you are experimenting with different things, we definitely want to see that. We want to see essentially what you'd consider to be your strongest work that kind of shows your range of artistic skills and ideas. And you can show things that we don't even offer for majors. Like, we don't offer ceramics at MCAD. But if you made a lot of ceramics pieces, I think you should definitely put them in if you think they're strong pieces. And so now I want to sort of get into showing more specific examples from our different areas of study. So this is animation. Some people submit animations as animated GIFs, or sometimes potentially even short animations or reels. Lots of different options there. We're one of the only schools in the country that offers a comic art major. So we get a lot of students that are interested in that. Or maybe you're not interested in majoring in that, but you're doing illustration and comic work. And it can get tricky showing more narrative, long form based artworks like filmmaking or, especially book arts or comic art. So I would say the best way to show these forms of art are showing, specific pages. Maybe you're showing a couple pages kind of in one image, or just kind of showing panel structure across one or two pages, maybe a spread. Because like I said, there is that limit of 12 to 20 pieces. Let's say maybe you have something printed. I also like talking about this with graphic design or photography. You could potentially, show a well-documented video of a photo book or a zine, or something that you've produced physically, and that would only count as one piece, which is pretty cool. So then we also have drawing, of course, a very one of the most traditional forms of art. Painting as well. I just like showing the range. There's some like more traditional work, there's digital work, more abstract, more figurative. Furniture design. And graphic design. A lot of graphic designers work digitally, but if you are doing things physically, I like this example kind of in the bottom middle there of someone who actually produced like a small booklet and printed it out and documented that. Sometimes the things that you're making are tangible and you can show that in your portfolio. Illustration, that is our largest major at MCAD, so we see a lot of really great illustration. Most people, I would say, are working digitally typically, but for those who are doing more traditional illustration or more experimental illustration, making sure you can photograph your pieces or scan them to make a good digital image to submit. And photography, same there, but maybe you're doing analog photography, or you're doing more experimental work like cyanotype or alternative processes, something more physical. You'd want to make sure you are photographing that or scanning it. And print paper book. The nature of this major is often about physical process, especially when it comes to book arts. And then product design, same with that, like a great opportunity to show process as well. And then showing the end physical product. Maybe you're also showing prototypes, sketches. And then sculpture. And I think the biggest challenge with sculpture, especially if you're doing larger scale work, is taking good photographic images of it. But you can definitely include multiple angles, like this person in the left showed not only the sort of larger image of the piece, but then close-ups, details of the piece from different angles, as if you were seeing it in real life. So people ask, what makes a good portfolio? I said that earlier. Like I said, it's a very hard question to ask. It's so individual. It's based on your work. I like to tell people that, it is what you'd consider to be your strongest work, the work that you're most proud of. I should also say that we typically want to see more current work when it comes to portfolios. Hopefully in the last maybe 2 years, in your maybe senior year or junior year. But if you're a transfer student, that could include, work that you made where you're transferring from, or in the last couple of years of your artistic practice, but not necessarily. I don't want to say this is like definitely a hard rule. I've seen some pieces that students have said, I made this 3 years ago, I made this 4 years ago. And if it's a really strong piece, it might just stand the test of time and you should still submit it. But in general, I think, there's a lot to be said about including more current recent work that shows more growth, shows, more strength. But essentially, and I say this as well as, it's good to show, that you have a sense of artistic style or that you have ideas. But also if you're doing experimentation outside of that, we're a very interdisciplinary school. So I would suggest showing some things outside of that to also show, your, sort of breadth of work. So there are many different ways to do a portfolio review, which is essentially a conversation with possibly an admissions counselor or a college rep, or maybe even faculty of that school. There are national portfolio days, which are large events. We host the one in Minneapolis, Minnesota, for the whole state. So if you come to Minneapolis on October 8th, I believe, you can get a portfolio review not only from us and our faculty, but there will also be at least 20 other art schools in attendance. These also happen all over the country. I don't have updated dates on this presentation. However, I'm sure Christopher can throw in a link in the chat to the National Portfolio Day website, where you can get all of the different information on all the different cities and schools that are offering these. But also, they do them online. So that's going to be, there's actually one coming up, I think, in 2 weeks. So you can actually just show your work sort of via Zoom or some sort of online video chat and get feedback from someone. Or you can email us. You can email your MCAD admissions counselor. If you don't know who that is, you can email admissions@mcad.edu and say, hey, I'd love a portfolio review. I'd love to have a conversation about my work. Maybe you've already applied to MCAD, or maybe you're thinking about applying to MCAD. This is something we offer, and I definitely suggest you do it. It's really the best way, in my opinion, to prepare for submitting to an art school. And I'm just going to skip to this slide here. Thank you. Like I said, I'll put we'll get the National Portfolio Day schedule in the chat. And if you are interested in applying to MCAD, if you have not done so already for our fall or spring semester for 2024, there is a coupon code. So you can use that to waive the $50 application fee since you came to this event. And I would suggest that if you're interested in either of those 2 semesters, that you get started as soon as possible. We offer some really great early action scholarships, not only a laptop scholarship for a MacBook Pro, but also higher admission scholarships. So that's more money for you in scholarships. All right, now we'll see if we have any questions.
Hey, Forrest, we have one question, and it is, in your opinion, what should be the balance between life drawings and personal work in a portfolio? 50-50, 70-30, etc.
Okay, that's a good question. I would say it's going to be different for different schools. I would say for MCAD, we do potentially want to see some of that figure drawing or more traditional observational drawing, kind of, that kind of traditional practice work. But I would say, I wouldn't go maybe so far as to do 50-50. I would say if you have conceptual work or personal work that you're proud of that shows, more than just figure, I would say show more of that than, maybe 70-30, 80-20, something like that. Like, we do want to see that more technical work a little bit. That's why we have the observational drawing requirement. But I would say we're also, we're a very conceptual school, and, I think we're just as interested in that personal work and seeing that and your ideas come through rather than just those observational exercises. So, definitely include some, especially if they're strong, but I would say maybe include more personal work. But I haven't seen the work. You might want to have it a portfolio review, talk to somebody about that. So, yeah.
Okay, question here. How strict is the observational drawing requirement for the portfolio? Should it be a strict medium, strictly a still life study?
Yeah, it's I I mean, it is a strict requirement that you do have to have an observational drawing, but it can really be in any form that interests you. It could be landscape, it could be still life, it could be portraiture, could be an interior space. There really isn't a requirement on what it's composed of, what the subject is, or what the materials are that are used. I mean, the examples that I showed, some were digital, some were, more traditional graphite, charcoal. So yeah, that's not exactly strict. It is a little bit more interpretive. I would just say showing something, showing sort of more, showing a large value range and showing like proportion, and it is kind of a technical exercise, so you do want to show a little bit of that more than it being a conceptual art piece. But go crazy.
Great. All right. What is the max amount in scholarship money you generally give out to a student?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So for our fall and spring 2024 years, our merit scholarships are ranging from $12,000 to $25,000 per year. So essentially, if a student applies and is accepted, say the student is, a freshman, is going to be attending for 4 years, that's sort of the max for the scholarship amount. So it's renewable for up to 4 years. So if you get the $12,000 to $25,000, if you're in that range, then for 4 years, that would be $48,000 to $100,000 in merit scholarships. And I believe there are going to be some full ride scholarships offered as well on a very limited basis. So
Great answer. Are there any other schools that offer a comics major?
from what I know, we're the only one that calls it comics. I believe there are 2 other schools in the US that offer majors in sequential art, or sometimes they mix that in with character design. So I would say that's the most comparable thing. And there are really only a few. MCAD is very special in terms of that niche of art, offering a comics major. So it's pretty cool.
Okay. Does the observational drawing have to be a totally finished piece, or can it be like a sketchbook spread or something like that?
Okay, that's a good question. It should be as close to finished as you can make it. I would say we are a little bit more lenient or understanding when it comes to students that are coming from non-fine arts backgrounds, like maybe photography or filmmaking. Maybe you've never done an observational drawing. We still require it. We still require that you submit that. But I would say, it should be as finished as you can make it. Like I said, I do suggest, trying to include context in the work, trying to include maybe a foreground, middle ground, and background. If you're, drawing something that's on a table, what's behind the table, or what's in front of it, that sort of thing. So I would lean towards more finished than unfinished.
Yeah, I agree. Priority should go to finished work. Okay.
Yeah, and I would say that for every piece that you submit, aside from maybe the, like I said, you can include a process piece or maybe a sketchbook excerpt, but in general, we want to see finished pieces for all your portfolio pieces.
Yeah, I would say that if you were to include process work or sketchbook pieces, no more than 2 submissions.
Yeah, it's not a hard rule, but I would absolutely agree with Christopher. It's really kind of supplementary material. So,
okay. Next question. What about storyboard/animatic work? Is that something schools would like to see, or should I stick to more towards animation?
That's a really good question. I mean, if you do have finished animation, whether it's short or long, I mean, that's great. You should definitely be submitting that, at least to MCAD. We'd love to see that. Animation is usually tied for our largest major. So right now, I think it's our 2nd largest major. But storyboard and animatic work is also totally valid, and I think can make great portfolio pieces. But I would say, kind of like the thing I said earlier about more finished pieces, like if you would say your animation, shows, essentially more of a finished piece rather than the kind of prep work or the sort of, the stuff you'd make in advance, like the animatics or storyboards, then I would submit the animation. But it's possible that you could submit both or include a little bit of both. I think all of those are valid pieces.
Okay. Are there options to earn a degree online from MCAD?
So for our undergraduate programs, there is no fully online option. There are some classes that are sometimes remote, but really the majority of the undergrad experience is in person. We do offer some Masters of Arts online degrees. Obviously, you need to have an undergraduate degree first. So
Okay. Is it beneficial to have more work in your portfolio, slash, is it bad to only include 12?
ooh, that is a really good question. Right, 12 to 20, that is a range. What's better? In my opinion, I think Christopher could answer this too. I like to see more work. I think 12 is a small amount of artwork in a way. I mean, if you are making more pieces, if you have more work to show, I think showing more is good, provided they're all stronger pieces. I mean, I wouldn't just, say you had 12 pieces and then you had some very unfinished rough pieces and then you included those. Then I would say just stick to the 12. But if you have, in your opinion, strong pieces to show, I think, to me, more is better or can show more. Like I said, we're a very interdisciplinary school. There's going to be a lot of things that you're doing at MCAD outside of your major. So I think it's really interesting to see those things, to show more of your skills. But I would probably say that not every school agrees with that. There are some schools that have their portfolios are only 8 to 12 pieces, or, are very small. It's really going to be something you should talk to, your admissions counselor about, that specific school. I personally think seeing more work can be beneficial to show more of a kind of broad range of work or more of your ideas or experimentation, but maybe Christopher has a different opinion.
I think we're similar. More work is sometimes better to see a wider variety of things that you will have to offer. It sometimes can pull a portfolio down if you are just trying to add filler to reach
Yes.
that 20. So sometimes 13 to 15 is fine.
Absolutely.
You might be an artist who makes one painting every 4 months. So having 20 is going to take you a while. So understand that only a few, 12 is totally fine. Kind of depends on the work, really. Like if you have nothing but charcoal drawings of people's faces, if you have 20 of them, it can feel kind of redundant. Like after 12, it doesn't add anything to it. So I would say keep in conversation with your admissions counselor, whoever they are. They will tell you, or they will be available to let you know what will work and not work in your specific portfolio if you reach out to them and share the images you are interested in submitting before you officially submit. Kind of get their opinion before you submit it.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a 12-piece portfolio. That is the minimum, but that does not mean that it's lesser than 20 pieces. I think it's really about the strength of the work. If you're including more pieces just to include more pieces that are not as strong, then I would advise against it. But if you feel like you do have 20 strong pieces, I think then that's great, But really it's up to, depends on the work. You should, maybe have a more in-depth conversation or do a portfolio review or something like that, if you really want a more specific answer.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. The national portfolio day will be a good breadth of what each school will have thoughts on all of that. All right, next question. Does MCAD offer any work studies for any of the majors?
Yeah, we have tons of work study opportunities. It's not really major specific, but there are some things in the school that I think more, like a particular major might be more interested in. Like, say, maybe if you're a filmmaker or photographer, we do have a media center, which is essentially kind of a library of equipment that people can check out. So lots of filmmaking and photography equipment. Or maybe if you're a comic artist or someone who does a lot of printing, you might want to work in our printing area. We have tons of different sort of sections or availabilities for work study. So, yeah.
Work study is also a federal grant that so some will be offered. So some of them will qualify, some of you won't qualify.
Depends on
You
your FAFSA.
also need to complete the FAFSA, and usually I think it's before March.
Yeah,
After
March
March,
1st
no
is the
one
deadline
qualifies for
for
the
work study.
FAFSA. Yeah, for the work
Or no
study,
one
exactly.
qualifies for work. Yeah. There are some, if you did not qualify for work study on your FAFSA, there are very limited amounts of jobs on campus that are offered outside of that are offered just based on budgets of different departments. But it's much more limited. So yeah,
Get that FAFSA in early.
get it in early. Do it in October, November.
Question
It's
marks.
changing
This
this
is a
year.
weird year. Yeah.
It's a weird year, yeah. But obviously do it as soon as possible.
All right, next question. What is the timeline for application and hearing back about acceptance?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Actually, I'm going to pull up the presentation real quick, just to show the sort of application requirements right here. This comes a little bit before the portfolio section normally when I'm giving this presentation. So here it is. For applying to MCAD for fall 2024, this is our application checklist. So we do require high school transcript. If you've attended any college or have done some college classes for credit, we need to see those as well. We require a letter of recommendation or a letter of support. You do write a personal statement or provide an academic writing sample, and then your portfolio of artwork. We also encourage students to submit their FAFSA. So important dates. So deadlines for applications. There are multiple deadlines. So our early action deadline, which offers more in scholarships as well as an additional laptop scholarship, is December 1st. And I should say December 1st and February 15th offer a larger range of scholarships. After that, it's first come, first served. So there may be less to offer or give out when you're accepted past February 15th. So the December 1st deadline, which I recommend all of you try to shoot for, get your applications in, start submitting those materials. You get essentially an additional laptop scholarship, which basically means a free MacBook Pro once you start at MCAD, basically an extra $2,000 scholarship, essentially. So you get the newest MacBook Pro, fully loaded with the Adobe Suite. It's a requirement that you have one. Normally, it essentially is a kind of a fee on your first year of tuition. You basically buy the laptop from us, but with this, you would get that as a scholarship. You'd get this for free, which is great. And like I said, merit scholarships range from $12,000 to $25,000, renewable for up to 4 years. So that means between about $48,000 and $100,000.
Okay, so when your application is completed, when do you hear about a decision?
So typically, students hear back about, I would say, within 2 weeks of submitting their finished application.
Awesome.
So we don't just admit on the deadlines, we do admit outside of the deadlines as well.
Okay. Question here. I'm a junior. When should I start applying to art schools?
Oh yeah, so essentially you do have to wait till your senior year. You do apply. Applications are only open for the next year's like fall 2024. You'd be starting in 2024 in August. That application opens this year. It's already opened. Usually it might open at the end of the summer or beginning of the school year. So you do have kind of that range of time between this fall and next spring. So you would be probably starting the application process next year.
Okay. How do schools feel about fan art? Specifically, art that includes personal ideas, yet would still technically fall under the fan art category. Would it be frowned upon to include this?
Ooh, that's a really excellent question. I mean, we have tons of illustration-based majors. Lots of people make some pretty amazing fan art. And I think it's very much a gray area, I would say. There are many instances where fan art can feel like very original interpretations of characters or ideas, and then they can also feel more like plagiarism, like more for like one-to-one copies of other people's work. So I would say, I would lean less towards having a lot of fan art pieces. We've more or less sometimes said, 1 to 2 pieces at the most for fan art. But I think if it's something that you're concerned about, you might want to have a conversation with your admissions counselor about that and maybe show them some examples. Because I think there are, like I said, I think it is a gray area, but I would say lean towards having more original content than not.
Yeah, so schools will all feel different about it. Some will
Yeah.
be way more harsh about not including any whatsoever. A few might allow 1 or 2, no big deal. And occasionally you might get away with it because the person reviewing your work has no idea what that is in reference to. But that can't always be the case. So
Yeah.
ideally, priority should come from your own individual ideas.
Yeah, I would tread lightly. And if it's something you're really concerned about, I think having a conversation with your admissions counselor about it, whatever school you're applying to. Yeah, that's a great question.
All right, next question. I have never seen set design in a portfolio before. Is there a reason for this? Is it something I should include?
I think set design could be a valid portfolio piece. I think there's a lot to be said about fabrication, about whatever your role is in set design. I think it maybe has a lot to relate to maybe furniture design, product design, maybe even visual art, like fine arts. I'd say we probably don't see it a lot because most people that are doing set design are more interested in performing arts or pursuing more technical approaches to that in performing arts schools. But yeah, I think set design would probably be a pretty cool thing to include in a portfolio. At least I think MCAD would be fine with it. Generally, in anything that is inherently collaborative in art, you should probably disclose what your role was in creating whatever it was. And I think very important in like filmmaking or really any animation, maybe even anything more collaborative is disclosing your role in making that thing. So if you're doing set design and it's a larger team, you should probably talk about what you did specifically, or sort of lean towards showing more things that included your artistic vision, if that makes sense.
I think it did. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I say include it. Again, we just want to see the things you do, and the website called Slide Room, where you upload those images, does allow for a description to be written out for you to tell us things like dimension, size, scale, materials, what your role is. Like sometimes someone submits a mural where they designed the mural, but other people painted it, or they did it with a community. So they didn't actually paint it themselves, but they came up with the entire concept for it.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect example of a collaborative process where you'd want to say like, hey, I didn't actually paint this, but I organized it, or I did the outline. Yes,
Designed it.
Yeah.
All right, next question. Do you apply for the laptop scholarship separately, or are you automatically considered for it upon normal application?
Oh yeah, so if you submit all of those required materials, that whole application checklist before December 1st, you would automatically be considered for the laptop scholarship. And if you were accepted for that deadline, then you would get the laptop scholarship. So it's not something you have to fill out separately. You're going to be automatically considered and awarded it if you are getting in for that deadline.
Okay. Within this school, which operating system is the main usage on school devices?
Yeah, we are mostly a Mac-based school. So like I said, we have MacBook Pro scholarship. There are a few Windows-based things. I think in some of the 3D fabrication areas, there might even be a Windows PC in the animation studio for some reason. So there might be some specific programs that either require that or works better for whatever that thing is in the school. But in general, we're a Mac-based school.
Okay, when it comes to photograph pieces, should I focus more on the blunt contact of the picture or the editing of the original photo?
I guess I'm not sure. Maybe you can expand on that. Is that more about like photography as an art, or are you talking about photographing artworks as documentation. If you're talking about photography just as an art form, I think both of those things are important, showing subject and the delivery or sort of visual style of that subject, whether that's editing or I guess maybe you can expand on that a little bit in the chat. Hopefully I can answer that more accurately.
Okay. Yeah. While we wait, we have another question. How do I get in contact with my admissions counselor at MCAD?
Yeah, very easy. You can email our admissions office, and then they will forward your information to whoever your counselor is. We basically all work with students from different areas of the country, so really kind of depends on where you're living, what your zip code is, and then you'll be assigned a counselor, and they can follow up with you. And then you can have someone that you can contact directly. So admissions at MCAD.edu. Christopher just put it there in the chat. And once you know who that person is, you can really get in touch with them. You know, they can be your first point of contact.
How accurate would you say the net tuition calculator is?
Well, that's a good question. What would you say, Christopher? How would you answer that question?
I would say it's pretty accurate, just because financial aid mentioned it earlier in the summer, and I don't think they would talk about it if they didn't update it.
Yeah, it's probably pretty accurate. I mean, the most, there's going to be so much variation, or there's going to be a lot of variables depending on what your admission scholarship is, what your financial aid is based on your FAFSA. So, I would say, looking at that is a really good thing to do, but then also really to know how much everything is going to cost is really solely based on you finishing your application and submitting your FAFSA to us. So, but it's nice to have that tool.
There's also a fair bit of guessing and averaging, just because no one really knows what you'll do while you're in school. Like if I decided to go to college and I wanted to make a sculpture, if I decided my sculpture needed to be made out of gold, it'd be a very expensive sculpture, as opposed to just cement or concrete, which would be significantly less. So sometimes a sculptor will spend more than like a digital illustrator because they're not spending as much on materials.
Yeah, I would say the only thing that is, really speculative in those things would be like materials cost is going to just really depend on student to student. I mean, you're going to spend some money on materials. I mean, we're not a liberal arts college. You're not really buying a lot of expensive textbooks. You're buying artwork supplies. You're buying your art supplies, or maybe you're buying equipment, or maybe you're using equipment that MCAD has and you don't want to spend that money on equipment. Like there's so many different options. I think, Christopher gave a great example about like a digital illustrator. They're not going to spend much on that material, but maybe they're buying a new Apple Pencil or whatever.
I did get a follow-up to the photograph question. If I were to photograph something and submit the original photo as an art form, should I submit the raw photo, or is editing a portion of the photograph part of it?
Oh, I see. Okay. Thank you for expanding on that. I am a photographer. That is my art form. So I feel equipped to answer your question. I would say, you should submit an edited photo. I don't know if you really can submit a raw photo. Usually that's a pretty specific file format. So there is going to be some conversion to JPEG or TIFF or whatever format you're using. And I think, in my personal philosophy of photography, there is no unedited photo. So, you need to convert it somehow, I think editing is an important part of the artwork of photography. But I would say, like, if you feel like your editing skills aren't super robust, I think really the content of the photo, the artwork, the message you're trying to give with the photo is more important than how well you edited it in Photoshop or something. But so I hope that answers your question.
Okay, next question here. Should I apply for scholarships along with the initial application, or only if I get admitted?
So when you apply to MCAD, you'll automatically be considered for those admissions merit scholarships. And if you're submitting the FAFSA, which you should do, you're going to obviously be considered for whatever scholarships or grants or loans or aid there. But if you're asking about like outside scholarships, you can definitely look into those. There's different resources for that. I think we share specifically the finaid.org.gov link on our website for looking for outside scholarships. We do have some information about that on our website, kind of under financial aid. I think if our financial aid person was here, they would also tell you to be careful about just researching scholarships online to find more legitimate sources of those. But yeah, there's tons of potential things out there outside of the MCAD admissions scholarship or your federal financial aid.
Yeah, and I would say if you can start them early, the earlier you start them, the more you could actually apply towards. The later you start, the less time you have, the fewer you get to apply towards. So if you are awarded any of them, you can apply them to whatever school you choose to move forward with. Like you'll hear after your admissions decisions from multiple schools usually, whether you earned that external scholarship or not. So it doesn't hurt just to do it, regardless of where you want to go, just so you have that for yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. We have one more question. So if there are any more, please ask, because we are ending this in about 7-8 minutes. So far, the final question is, for animation as a major, should I work more on 3D or 2D in my portfolio?
That's a great question. I would say it's really up to you. We offer both. You can kind of specialize in both. I mean, you will be doing both in the program. You learn 2D and 3D. Even when you specialize in one, you're still getting like a foundation in both 2D and 3D animation. So that's a great question. I think if you can show both, I think that's really great. But I would say if you're trying to decide which one to show more of, I guess whichever one you're most passionate about. Both are valid.
One question got thrown in here. What would maximize my chances of getting a full ride scholarship?
That's a good question. I mean, pretty much all of the things that we've talked about so far, making sure to have a good portfolio, all of the different application requirements, all factor into scholarship amounts. I guess, do you have anything to add about the full ride potential, Christopher?
I really think it's just, make your overall application as strong as possible, and that is a portfolio of artwork, because again, that is like 50% of the consideration, but also do the best you can while in high school. Like those with a higher GPA will probably be considered, because we want a well-rounded student, not just someone who is good at artwork. We want you to be a successful student. So those who are working hard, both academically and artistically, will probably be more likely considered.
Yeah. I think that was a great answer. I think that makes sense. Christopher also just put the finaid.org link in the chat there. So check that out. That has information on, it's a great resource for looking for outside scholarships when applying to MCAD or applying to anywhere.
Yeah, anywhere. Because if you're thinking about art and design somewhere, I want you to be applying to multiple places to find the best fit for yourself. MCAD's great. I think it's a cool place. But, like anything, it's subjective. This can't fit everybody.
Yeah. And to add to that, I mean, it's not really about portfolio preparation, but visit the schools that you're interested in. If you are interested in MCAD, reach out to our admissions office. And if you can visit our campus sometime, I think that's the best way to really know, if you're a good fit for a school or if a school is a good fit for you, is meeting people there, getting the vibe, seeing the campus, seeing the place that you're going to be doing artwork, taking your classes. It's really the best thing you can do, I think, because it can be a really tough decision to make sometimes. But totally come and visit us. We'll be there. We'll show you around. Me and Christopher.
We've done it
Take you
before.
around the campus. We've done it before, and we'll do it again. We'll be there tomorrow.
We will. Walking around, talking about the building. All right. I mean, that's it for questions. So
All
I don't
right.
know if
Well,
you want to call it.
Yeah, well, thank you everybody for coming. If you have, since we're getting so close to the end here, if you do have additional questions, please reach out to our admissions office. We're happy to answer them, especially, maybe if there's something we already answered and you just forgot and you want to know again. Email admissions@mcad.edu or your admissions counselor if you know who they are. And yeah, thanks for coming. Good night. And I believe Christopher put that fee waiver code in there. Don't forget that. Copy and paste that right now. App 2024. Start your application to MCAD right now. The sooner you can do it, the better. You can get those materials and get those steps in piece by piece before the early action deadline. Get more money in scholarships. All right. Well, have a good night, everybody.
Recording stopped.
Oh, ต่อกันแล้วเหรอเอ้าไปแล้วเนี่ยเอาไปอันไหน